Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're enjoying the interviews here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you are watching or listening. Also, if you are interested or know any folks that would be interested in coming and chatting, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle there is Isaac R. Levin. All right, so with that out of the way, let's get to our guest. I got coffee ready, and I'm excited for my guest today. My guest today is Andres Pineda. Andres, do you want to say hello, introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I got my coffee too ready.
All right, all right.
Well, my name is Andres Pineda. I am Dominican from Dominican Republic originally, but I'm based in Montreal right now. I've been living in Canada for the last 7 years, and I'm work at Shopify as a front end developer. And I love open source. I love communities. That's how we met, Isa, actually.
Yeah.
From the community at Twitter, and you're one of the great people that I follow on Twitter, and I'm so glad to be here today.
I mean, I don't know about great people. I appreciate you saying the nice things. I'm excited for the conversation. We were chatting a little bit before we got started about some of the stuff, and I think that it's going to be a great chat. So I'm looking forward to it. I like to start out these chats kind of with, let's get your tech origin story. Like, do you know a particular point in time where you came across tech? Maybe you were younger, maybe you were in school already, and you came across it and you're like, this is what I want to work on. This is what I really have an interest in, and I want to work on this the rest of my life.
That's an interesting question because, well, first of all, I was not one of the luckies that started doing code like 5, 6, 8 people. As we hear, probably here in the show, we have seen people that started very young, their careers. I was not that case. I at the beginning I didn't like computers, so that's why I mentioned Dominican Republic. Back when I was 10, there was not computers around me at all, and the first time I saw a computer I was in high school, almost finishing high school. It was for probably 14 years old, and I remember that that day I was in front of the computer, and the instructor is not doing anything relevant
Sure.
for the class, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so. I felt dumb. All the power that I knew that you could have from a computer, and we were just using Paint, using Paint and all those things that Windows 3.11 used to come with, and so that means I a little bit fast forward. I finished high school. I'm looking for a career to study, and I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to be in the Navy, and that didn't work out. So I was a little bit lost. And I remember Mama, she told me you should probably study computers. Computers is something that from the future people is talking about computers. Computer and English are the two things that every professional should know about. And I said, well, let's give it a try. At the beginning, I didn't like it. It was not to me, but I want to tell you why was the point when I realized it was to me.
Sure.
Finishing the first semester, I find this friend, a very good friend, still is my friend, even since been probably 25 years since then. And I met this guy that he has with this huge book, C++. I don't remember the real title, but it was a C++. And I started reading the book. And I started going through the exercising, and I can tell you, I didn't understand anything that was happening in the code. I didn't understand initialization. It was a lot of cout, a lot of usings, but none of those things make sense to me. But I really liked what I saw. I felt that I connected with software and computers at that specific time, and this is why up to now, at least the person who I read the book I read the book from, I still say, hey, thank you that you at some point, there's some way we cross, and I was able to see it because I love coding. I love what I do. And I'm glad that was the way. So that was my first time. And since then it's been all the way connected to software.
I mean, it is kind of interesting. I think that there is something interesting to say about you went to an expert, right? And they were showing you things that you thought weren't relevant. Like I always joke about, I think my first web page design class, the teacher is showing us how to do stuff in Notepad, right? And I'm like, okay, I mean, there has to be a better tool for this. Obviously, there is, but that's what that particular instructor, that professor felt was the easiest way or the simplest way to kind of get their point across. Um, it is very interesting, but I'm glad that you stuck with it. For one, I think that the work that you're doing in the open source space is absolutely awesome. Um,
Thank you.
but let's dive a little bit deeper into, you know, you said you wanted to be in the military, right? Like, was that a you thought that you could have a good life and career in the military, and then this computer thing fell into your lap, and you're like, oh, this is a way better option.
So with the military, I think it was more about I love how well two things I enjoy about the military is like the discipline that people get there. And I'm telling you that I was not very disciplined at that time. So
Sure.
probably I was eager to get that.
Yeah.
And also have you seen the movie from Leonardo DiCaprio when he said, and any no one can stare at suits. Like catch me if you can. He
Yeah.
made a quote. I don't remember what the quote it says. It's about the suits and let's face it, people they look good
Yeah.
wearing the suit. Yeah, they
Yeah.
look really good.
Yeah. I know what quote you're talking about from that movie. I can't remember what it is either, but basically it's like people are blinded by like the way that somebody is dressed, right? If they're
Yeah,
dressed sophisticated and they're dressed neat and they look sharp, like you take them more seriously than you would if somebody who was dressed with casual clothes on, right? Like I think that was
yeah,
the whole premise. And I totally agree with that. Like I'll see, whether it's someone wearing like a really, really nice suit, like walking around like New York City or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, that person, they have it all figured out. And for all I know, they could not at all.
yeah,
Probably they don't because
exactly,
nobody's got it figured
exactly.
out. But you have this perception, right? And it's interesting
Yeah.
that like for you, the military was like this visual thing, like, and you equated that visual thing with structure. Was there something about technology and like how technology has to be very structured and you can't, like, you have creativity obviously when we write software, but you have to fit within these confines? Was there, now maybe thinking about it retrospectively, is there something where like, oh, that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, so even before I decided to join and work towards computers, I was that little kid that used to open all the electronics in the house.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wanted to see what was inside. I wanted to see how things work. To a point that I there was a single TV in my house. It was one of these small 12 inches, and I opened the TV. I just watched around. I didn't do anything. I
Yeah.
promise. I closed it, and it didn't turn on this day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I got punished because of I damaged the only TV that was at the house. But yeah, I was that, and I at some point I wanted to be mechanic because I used to take these little models and then put the wheels and create stuff with those stuff with those things, anything electronic in my house. I was the kid work using it and playing with it.
Yeah, I can relate to that 100%. I've told the story a million times. Like I used to, take apart remote control cars, put them back together. First computer I got growing up, I took it apart like day 2 or day 3. Parents were super thrilled about that, as you can imagine. But I think one thing that's clear about folks that like to tinker or folks that like to figure out how stuff gets, we always have the ability to get it back to the way it was. It might
Yeah.
take way longer, but and at least maybe I'm like this, and I don't know if you're like this. You could correct me if it's not. Like there has to be like this amount of like perfection or like exception to detail, right? Like I know that it has to go like this and like this and like this, and I think it goes back to maybe something you were saying about that structure, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you like when you're working on something for some of the stuff you're doing at Shopify or some of the stuff you're doing in the open source space, do you write down or kind of like organize your thoughts in a particular way, or is it all just like in flow state like what I hear all the time?
I love writing down and paper. Here next to me,
Yep.
I have my notebook. I have a pen, and I love organizing my day. So before closing the day, I used to like in digital, I used to organize the things for next day, and then I took a paper next day in the morning, and I put the most important things that I want to cover for that day, and not only for work. I do that for everything, all the parts of my life. You know that So I have a full-time job, but I also do public speaking, and I
Yeah.
also collaborate in open source, and I also have a family, 3 kids and wife, and there's a lot of things that we as a person we need to take care of, and writing down and scheduling and putting reminders for all those kind of things is something I enjoy and I try to do all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like I think if you don't have, if like in your case, like if you have a handful of kids and you have a wife or a spouse or whoever, and somebody that outside of work you need to have a relationship with, and you don't have like a calendar that has like all of my stuff, all of their stuff, all of the kids stuff, uh it ends up becoming a nightmare. Like,
Yeah,
my wife and I went down this path a few months ago. Like, we had this family calendar and
we
there was
do.
a bunch of stuff in there. But I started to get frustrated because I couldn't look at a glance and know what was going on. So like I started creating different calendars for different activities and they were all color coded. So now like if you look at our family calendar, there's like 80 colors on there, which I don't know if that's any helpful. Like my wife is like, what is going on here? Like what are these? Because if we're going to a concert, I put those in a different calendar. Or if I have a work meeting, I put them in a different calendar. From traveling, um, I think it just helps me like be able to filter out the noise a little bit because I can turn on and turn off calendars. Don't know how helpful that is, but like I think down this path of like making sure that everyone is aware of the work that we're doing, because especially in our case where we do open source, like the open source happens like in our family time, technically, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not getting
Hmm.
paid for it. So like there needs to be like this really good balance of, okay, I'm going to take an hour here to work on this, or maybe I'll wake up early before the family's awake to work on something. Or if you have a spouse that's like, hey, Andres, you have 2 hours today, like have at it.
Hmm.
And then you're like, I need more than 2 hours, but okay, I'll take that 2 hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
You
how,
describe exactly
yeah. So
you describe exactly the interactions between my wife.
yeah, let me ask you a question, just completely off topic. Does your wife get it? And there's a reason why I asked the question.
And I tell you, now she does, and I
Yeah,
will tell you why. Now it's different. She used to be in a different career.
yeah,
When we moved to Canada, she was accountant,
sure.
and I've been collaborating in conferences even before moving to Canada. And but now she's also in tech. So
Oh, cool.
now that she's also in tech, yes. So she's very involved in all this in other community. So she knows the hat.
Yeah,
She know how it works. She know like meetings, like conversations
yeah,
and mentoring. I try to one of the things that I do. I open sometimes the calendar to do office hours, and so she understands that. She goes with me, or we go together to conferences. We collaborate, and I think it did it on purpose. She 2018 was the first time that she participated in a software conference. I brought it
sure.
PyCom US
Oh,
in
okay.
Cleveland,
Not a
and
small one.
not a
Not
small one,
not a
but
small one.
she got hooked because I knew
Yeah.
that was the best. Well, that for me is I understand it's one of the best conference for not only for the tech that you learn, but for the people that you connect with.
Yes.
Conference is all about people and networking, and that conference was great for that. And after that, we have been participating not only in the conference. She's now one of the organizers for one of the track on PyCon US, the
Oh,
PyCon the track in
that's
Spanish.
awesome.
So you
That's
see,
great.
so now it's easy for me because sometimes I'm busy. I say I need 2 hours tonight to do something open source or prepare a talk. And she said, "Oh, I got to do something for myself as
Sure.
well," because
Sure.
she's also busy.
Yeah, so I think I'm in a similar track. My wife's not in tech, but so she didn't really get it until she saw me actually do it. So like we had the opportunity, we went to a conference in the States that has like a family track where they have like some sessions that are for kids or for families, basically because the expectation is like, oh, this is not just a technical conference, this is a community. And
Yeah.
that conference, who is run by my friend Clark. If anybody is curious, check that out. That.us. Um, they so my wife, she sat in on one of the conferences or one of my sessions, and it was a session that wasn't technical. It was before the pandemic, and it was like how to like basically like how do I work from home talk, because at the time I was working from home, I'd been working over a long time, and the room was packed and there's people sitting outside kind of peeking in, and my wife was sitting there and she's like, oh, I get it, I understand why they enjoy it. I think also she realized that I'm a bit of a I like attention a lot. So the ability
Yeah.
to like stand on stage and like have people all focused on me is something that, really got me excited. Um, but yeah, I think in general, like the conference thing, I tell people all the time, like if you're curious about tech and you have the opportunity to like if figure it out, go to a conference.
Yes.
Like obviously it's a bit harder now with the pandemic and everything else, but um if you have the opportunity to go to like a code camp, like a code camp, like a code day, or go to a conference that's in your area that's might be free, or try to wrangle with the organizers to get a free pass. Like if you enjoy that experience and like talking with other people about technology that interests you, things that interest you, like then that you should be in
Yeah.
tech, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean to say that you don't like you need to go to tech conferences to be in tech, but I think in general, like there's
It's
people,
the conversations that
yeah,
happens there.
yeah,
I agree, and that's one of the advice. And I something I add to that is that regardless of so regardless of the technology that the conference is around. So if you're looking to get into tech and you don't know, I mean, don't go to probably to the biggest conference, but start going also to
yeah,
meetups. Start collaborating, talking to people, and see what they talk, see what the challenges. See in you, as you mentioned, Isaac, by listening these stories,
yeah,
you will realize
yes.
if you really want to be in tech.
Yeah. And there's something to say about like if you just like the work, but you don't want the work to kind of trickle into your family life, that's cool too. But
Yeah, that's cool.
I think there's folks like you and like me and some of our friends that are on tech Twitter or wherever, right? That like we need this community. Like this
Yeah,
community is very, very important to us because um it's a healthy outlet for us to talk about the things that we find interesting. Obviously, Twitter isn't the healthiest place all the time, but I think if you
yeah,
stay like in your bubble with, people that you care for and respect, like it's always good conversations.
yeah.
And worst case, you find like cool blog posts or cool ideas or cool repositories that people are putting together. So it's always a good opportunity to find stuff that you might want to be a part of as well.
Yeah, and as I mean, the amount of great folks that I have met on Twitter, it's incredible. I mean, to a point that you feel that you are friends. You feel
Yeah.
that you have made so much collaboration on social networks, in let's say Twitter, or one repository in GitHub, that at the time that you finally meet, like in person, you feel like, oh, I already know a lot of things about you
Yeah.
because all the things that we have talked to on Twitter. So yeah, Twitter is, as you mentioned, might be not the best sometimes, but I think in general it provides value
Yeah.
to anyone in tech looking to get informed about the things that are happening, and also just connect with people.
Yeah. So, going back to kind of your progression through tech, like when did open source kind of enter the conversation, right? Like, I think you and I are of an age where open source was this thing. It wasn't really like, in the forefront of technology. And now, like in the last 10 years or so, it definitely is, right? Like,
Yeah.
huge companies are building things completely in the open. Huge companies are taking advantage of open source to build the next big thing, right? Like,
hmm
when did open source come a kind of cross your view and you got really interested in like the idea of the community around it?
So it was a three steps, I would say. It all started with communities. I
Hmm.
was not a community guy. I was not. I, it's like I used to do my edify work. I used to go home.
Yeah.
I used to do things on my own. But then I started participating back in Dominican Republic in the first Python meetup. It was Python Dominicana. That was 2012. But then there, I learned so many things, like collaborating, public speaking. That in that community, I made my first public presentation, my first and many others after that. Then I started hosting other meetups, and then I started finding the importance of being around people with the same mindset and
Yeah.
with the same looking for the same goals.
Hey, folks, there's a little bit of audio issue, so we're going to fast forward to later in the conversation with Andres. what else is like, what are some other things, areas in the space are in technology or open source that you're looking at? And, you know, are there things that you're doing at Shopify that you're like, oh, like we could take advantage of that open source project? Or, hey, I'm trying to build this thing for, I don't know, maybe to create like a nice looking calendar for my family, right? Like, what are some projects that you've seen recently that you're like, oh, that's really cool. I'm really, I appreciate some of the stuff they're doing there.
So one thing is that internally, Shopify, there's a culture to support open source. I don't know if you know that Shopify is one of the biggest maintainer supporter for Ruby.
Oh,
Most
okay.
Yeah, so most of the code base of the Ruby code base is most of the internal Shopify backends are made on Ruby. That's publicly available. And so yeah, as being Shopify so dependent on Ruby, we try as a company to give back to the, and it's not only Ruby. Many of the libraries that we use internally that are open source. There are so as a company we try to compensate, and also the fact that it promotes open source for the developers. Like if there are any open source that we as a developers, any open source project slash library that we understand that the company should be supporting, there are ways to ask for those types of support. Um, Also, I think you can get some time and work on open source outside but for libraries that are relevant to the company. But still, it's nice because
Yeah.
of I've been in companies where that's not a thing. As you mentioned, if we want to work in open source, it's gonna be on our own time. So in my case, I don't work with Ruby yet, and
Okay.
but I believe that if I ever go to do some backend, I would try to collaborate with the Ruby repositories, and trying to collaborate with the community and be part of the communities, because I believe, well, I've seen it in the different communities that I've been collaborating, Python, .NET, Xamarin, now as a Maui, um, Uno platform as well. So the thing is that when you part of the community, I feel it's easier. Communication
Yeah.
is easier. It's
Sure.
not that you're not knocking doors to someone that doesn't know you. It's like you have seen each other at least in the comments, in the discussions, because you care about the product
Yeah.
as well as that person that is the maintainer also cared about the product. So
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to say about like we all in open source take pride for the work that we're doing. And I mean, you really appreciate when someone is building something and their project isn't super popular. Like maybe you'll come across it and it's somebody and there's like thousands of commits on this project and it doesn't have a ton of stars and you're like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." And maybe that incentivizes me as an open source developer to like, oh, can I build something with this particular project or sponsor it or whatever, right? Because I appreciate the work that they're doing.
exactly, I do that. I mean, from time to time, I got a quota for sponsors. So there are certain projects that I sponsor like
Hmm.
all the time, but there are others that I say, okay, this is the quota that I have to share and rotate. So I start saying, okay, for these 3 months, I'm gonna collaborate on this, or 6 months, and then next 6 months, I'm gonna find another random uh, project. First, I try to go to the ones that I use, or pick a random one, just because we need to support we need to support those. For me, it's very important, and I understand that we need to support the folks behind the open source solutions.
Yeah.
Those are folks that we know that they have a full day. Most of the time they have a full day job, and it's the spare time they made available this library, and there's needs to be a way to retribute what they're doing for us, and most of the time we use it, and the companies that we work, they use it. And sometimes the company, they don't care, but we as a developers, as a humans, and we know how hard it is
Yeah.
to keep on top of a project outside of your work. So yeah, we can collaborate.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? The collaboration is the like the heart of open source, right? I mean, and I can keep on talking about like what are some of the projects that like you've built over the last few years that like you're really proud of, like things that you've been a part of. Like I know Uno is a big one of those things.
Yeah.
Like you know, what is one of the things that like keeps you keep coming back? Is it community? Is it just the feeling of doing work? Is it that giving back? What are some of the things that you think of like when you want to contribute to open source?
So yeah, uh, I think it's the community and the
Yeah.
people. Yeah, community and the people is the thing that makes me come back. And also, you mentioned we enjoy seeing the work that we do in the wild being used.
Yeah.
And for example, 1.4.5 6. Sorry if I'm saying the number,
Sure.
but
Sure.
recently there was a release of Uno platform, and we see the summary of the things that we achieve as a team, because it's not what I achieve. That's the importance of the open source. It makes you understand that you're just one single part of something bigger, and it's make you feel proud seeing that the evolution. If you see 2 years back, and you say, okay, we didn't have support for this, we didn't have support for that, and so we there's in that we have a presentation, and in the slides
Yeah.
it's like we do a timeline of the features that we have been adding for the last 2 years. And every time I look at the presentation, that slide, say, oh my gosh, it's a lot. And we're talking about 2 years inside during COVID, during really hard times, during people were losing jobs or people were scared. There was a lot of uncertainty, and still, as a team, we were able to continue shipping things that are relevant and are good for people that are out there looking for solutions like the one that we provide. So that's the thing that keeps me going.
That's awesome. I mean, it, it's fair to say that folks like you in the developer community are really helping champion open source. Um, Obviously, not everybody has like the same interest as you. So, like, what are some things that you think of that like folks can do? Maybe they don't want to, be like Andres and just start contributing and being a part and jumping like headfirst into it. Like, what are some other things that you think folks can do to feel like they're giving back or feel like they're being effective in the technology community without like going straight in and writing code?
So giving back has so many faces. I would say that if you see something in a documentation that you're reading, see a typo, just make a pull request. Most of the documentation these days are hosted on GitHub, and they accept pull requests. And um, if there is something that is missing in the documentation, add that part of the documentation. If there is not documentation for something, just post create a blog. I mean, if you like writing, just
Big
try to
if,
find
big if there, right?
try to find the things that you enjoy doing. There are many ways that you can record yourself, and or you can do demos, recording your screen, showing people how to do things. Twitter, you don't even need a blog post. Do a threads about things that are relevant, and the community will really appreciate it. That I've seen so good threads about technology that I use, that you go
Hmm.
to the documentation and they don't have
Yeah.
that kind of information, that very detailed. So Twitter threads, I mean, anything. If you want to be part of something, then go to an open source project, and you don't need to code. There are many ways to collaborate that are no coding. They say documentation. If you go at technical writing, or you want to learn how to do technical writing, because it's not the open source maintainers, they want the best of the best. I mean, you can
Hmm.
be someone that you enjoy writing, say, okay, I can collaborate by doing some writing, organizing the docs. If you're good in UX, also part of the docs or part of the same project. Just find what you love doing
Yeah.
now and combine that with the necessities, with the requirements that the open source projects have out there. Which open source project should you join? I think go to the one that you feel more connected to. Don't go to the biggest one. Don't go to uh, React, because it's huge, and probably it's gonna be hard for you to get their attention. Not saying that what happened, but it might be hard. Um, if you go to smaller projects, find, depending the technology that you're using, there's always a file that tells the dependency that you have.
Yeah.
If it is Python, the requirements test. If it is .NET, you go to the Nuget of the project file. Find that
Yep.
project that has the list of dependencies in the things that you build. pick one of those.
Yep.
Pick one of those that every time that you will do a fine new project, you go and immediately install. That's how I got into reactive UI, because I love reactive programming. I was learning about rx.net, and then I saw this nice project coming out, reactive UI,
Hmm.
and I said, okay, I love this, and I started collaborating and helping and talking, doing presentations. That's another way of helping. Do presentations, so you can be that echo voice of the project, so more people knows about that project. So there are many ways. Just find the one that you are more interested, and just connect with the maintainers, and they will most likely help you to get you going.
I mean, that's spot on. Like, I think I tell people all the time, like, we shouldn't be focusing just on contributing to code, but, writing documentation, writing test cases, just getting the
Mm-hmm.
word out, building, if you want to build content, like, oh, how do you use this particular project? Like, here, this is how you do it. You can clone it and all that sort of stuff. I mean, and that, kind of transitions well into like something I'd love to talk to you about, like the public speaking aspect or the content creation aspect of like open source, right? Like,
Yeah.
we mentioned this a bit earlier, like open source isn't a part of your job. Like, it's something that it's heavily it's supported, but like you're not going out and writing code that goes into open source repositories, right? For your job.
Yeah. No.
Just as well as like the speaking at events isn't that, right? So like you have
Yeah.
these two things that are directly related to each other that aren't a part of your work, right? So I guess my question is like, where do you get the energy to kind of create or do those things? Is it, you find passion for something, is like, oh, this would be a good talk, and then you learn the technology and you do that, and then maybe you deliver the talk at a meetup and then at a conference, and then rinse repeat. Like, what are some of the things that you think of when you're going to, putting together conference talks or whatever?
There are two things, and that's a very good question. So one is like me promoting the things that I'm working, or the
Hmm.
technologies that I'm working. So if I'm working with Uno, that's why I'm usually do presentations about Uno and WebAssembly, because all those are the two things that I'm passionate. Also, accessibility is another part
Yeah.
of the accessibility in global. It's one other thing that I am passionate about. And but there's also cases where I say, oh, I would like to learn this. And then I submit a presentation about a topic that is related to the thing that I want to learn.
Yes.
So that's how I learned gRPC. I never used it. Well, I had never used it, and now I did. The first time I talk, but what I did to force myself, I submit a presentation, did my Astra description. It was accepted, and then I said, okay, now I gotta learn it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I got like buying books and focusing and creating mobile apps, and the thing happened with accessibility is that the I love accessibility, but the when I had to do a presentation about accessibility, I got to document myself about
Yeah.
many things that I didn't know about
Sure.
accessibility. And so yeah, it's basically like that. Either things that I enjoy and I want to talk about because I'm passionate, or things that I want to learn because I like the technology. And say, let me use a presentation as a way to force myself to learn it, because I don't use it on my day to day, and usually I don't find time to there's so many things that usually I don't find time to try new stuff, because my agenda is already very busy.
Yeah. No, I could totally relate. So let me ask you this. I appreciate that there are people that like you that have like that area of interest that is accessibility. It's a little bit more challenging for me because I think that I have all these biases built in around like, oh, it works for me, it should work for everybody else, like those sort of things. Like, what is it about accessibility that really interests you enough to want to build content or build support for accessibility, or different able-bodied people to be able to use technology? Like, what is it about that gets you so excited?
There was a key moment. I One of my requests in the Uno platform, I had the opportunity to implement the accessibility support for voice readers, specifically for WebAssembly. And during the test, I had to put my phone on, having the the voice reader
Sure.
and on, and also you with the voice reader on, you need to learn a few gesture, like to navigate to a new page and to scroll. And I made a quick a quick test. I close my eyes and I try to follow everything, and it shocked me.
Sure. Sure.
It shocked me honestly. It shocked me really hard when I find I mean, because we took things for granted. I mean, we can see,
Hmm.
and for people who can't, we as a developers, is our responsibility to make the applications that we made, to make them that they can also use them. So building for everyone, not only for the ones that can see, or that doesn't have any disability. And since that moment, I started documenting myself about how I can be more inclusive in terms of the applications that I build. Uh, I made a presentation last year because it's every time that most of the time that people talk about accessibility is about voice reader,
Yeah.
and my presentation was like a accessibility beyond voice readers, because there are many other things that we as a developers we can do to make our applications more accessible, like colors and contrast colors and font, supporting bit fonts. I read the other day like 25% of people use no, it was bigger. I don't remember the number. It was a big number. It uses a font higher than the one that we set on the device, like the default one. So if our mobile applications, being a mobile developer, if we do not apply support for big fonts, like making sure that the tests align correctly, people won't be able to use
Sure.
your mobile
Yeah.
app. And so there are many things that I learned for that presentation. And yeah, but basically that moment in time where I had to support and I had to go through the struggle of using gesture and
Yeah.
navigation and listening. And if you don't put the right labels, you people using with disabilities, with size disability, would not be able to understand what is happening on the screen. So yeah, it shocked me, and I'm trying to use that moment to keep myself going forward in terms of making applications now web also
I mean,
more accessible.
that's awesome. Like, I think, one thing that you mentioned there is, like, you built empathy for somebody who needs things a bit different than you or me, right?
Yeah.
Like, I
Mhm.
think that that's really important. Not even in, like, even if we go outside the accessibility space, but in general, right? Like, the greatest people that I've ever worked with in the user experience space is they have that level of empathy where it's like,
Yeah.
what is this particular product or feature or app or whatever going to instill for the user or instill for the customer? And if you go down that you slide down to that accessibility space, like, you know, you can build like the most visually appealing app. It can be gorgeous with great animations and great transitions. But if somebody has vision problems, or not vision
Mhm.
problems, but if they need screen readers or things like that, like, they're not getting that advantage, right?
They're
Like,
not
they're
taking
just,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
There was a great talk I saw at a conference a few years ago where it was a developer who was completely blind, and they used Visual Studio, like the text,
I think
yeah,
I watched.
text to talk. I'll be sure to put it into the show notes, if I can find it. But yeah, he was a developer, and he used Visual Studio, and Visual Studio would speak out, or the computer would speak out, like, what they were doing with their mouse and keyboard, or with their keyboard. And it was just the and this person was writing actual code, like, not just like hello world, but like actual code.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it was absolutely captivating because it was as simple as a tool existed to make what they wanted to be able to accomplish possible.
Yeah.
Because, 15, 20 years ago, like, the idea of, like, oh, you're blind, like, you can't write software. Like, even if
Yeah.
you're the most brilliant software developer of all time, like, you physically can't do it. And now that's not a problem anymore because of some of
Yeah.
the work that's being done in the accessibility space. I think,
Yeah, I saw
yeah,
that presentation.
yeah,
I saw that presentation as well, and it's a miracle seeing that type of things, because what the technology can do, but also the diligence that that person did in
Oh,
order to
sure.
also to make it happen. So yeah,
Yeah, I think, and it goes back to the statement I made about empathy, right? Like if you can
yeah.
effectively put yourself in the shoes of somebody else for just a moment, you'll really appreciate how they might need things that are a bit different than you. And that's why I love having these sort of conversations, is because nobody is the same as me. Hopefully no one is the same as me. It's really great to be able to kind of get different folks' opinions. And one of the things that I would love to talk with you about, like we talked about a little bit earlier, right? Like you and I look very different, right? We live in different parts of the world and all of that. Like, how has it been for you, like living in Canada, being from the Dominican Republic? How has that, you know, shaped how you are as a software developer, as a technologist?
So the transition was interesting.
Yeah.
I had the benefit that before coming to Canada, I worked for in two different companies, one from Norway and another one from the United States. So I
Okay.
already had the the way of working is completely different.
Sure.
Like compare with the Dominican Republic and the United States, Canada and the United States is almost the same. But when I got here, I already got that, and it was not hard. But I heard people usually struggle because of we didn't have stand-ups before. There in the Dominican Republic, there was not stand-up. There was not like agile. There was not so all the type of things that here are normal for most company. Probably some companies won't do it. Um, also with the technology wise, so the first company that I joined when I got Canada, we were doing a native development and also Xamarin. It's the same company behind Uno, right?
Okay.
Inventive, and so I was prepared because by that time I was already in community. I was part of communities. I was part even of conversations so everything that has to do with architectures and things about mobile apps. I was I felt that I was ready.
Sure.
So for me, it was easy. I gotta say, because of the involvement that I have in the community before coming here. I think that was huge because um, if you ask me how would have happened, the person, me myself, before joining the community, the person that I was a decent developer. I'm still a
Sure.
decent developer, but I was even less decent.
So
uh,
humble, so
and
humble, decent developer.
and uh and that person probably could do the technical work, but there are other areas where we as a developers we need to be also good at. It's like documentation. How do you interact with your folks, with the
Hmm.
people that you're working with? It's true that people that are introvert and they don't, but at some point you will need to have conversations about a feature, a problem, a bug. And if you don't know how to handle those cases, then you're gonna have problems. As I say, it was not my case. When I came here, I was already very involved in the in communities. It was at this case I was hosting the Submarine user group in Dominican Republic and the .NET. There was two different. We wanted to keep it different, separate. And when I came Canada, Montreal, like 2 days later, I was looking for the organizer on Meetup, the organizer of the Submarine user group here at that level.
Sure.
Like I started collaborating with him and from there I met a really nice. I probably know Kim. I met Kim at that from that community as well, Kim Noel, and that's why it was easy for me because I came prepared with the soft skills
Sure.
required because it was not only on the technical side but on the soft skills required for the for the for the position.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to say about like anybody can learn to how to like write technology, like or how to write code or whatever, but like it's that interconnected tissue, like the having the conversations with business stakeholders that be able to translate requirements into actual code, understanding the technological landscape to like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, should I be building something from scratch? Should I be taking advantage of some other work that's been done, right? Like that is where the real skill is, the problem solving
Yeah,
skills, the connective tissue skills. Like writing code is just writing code, right?
yeah,
Like, you know, I'll be even more modest than you. Like I'm a mediocre developer at best. I think one of the things that I've been successful with in my career is just being able to connect dots quicker
Yeah.
than a lot of folks. Um, and I think that's one thing that's really, really important. Like when we talk with like the next generation of technologists, like, knowing all this math and all these algorithms, like they're important. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the
No.
day, like it's working with other people and being able to turn problems into solutions. And that's what's really makes a good, successful developer.
Yeah,
Uh,
you said working with other people. That's one of the things that I enjoy most.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, it's great. Like if you're, and this is probably not a fair thing to say, you're a bit more extroverted, right? Than probably
Yeah,
than probably a lot of folks are, right? So,
yeah, yes, yes, I am.
yeah, so things come a bit easier for you. But I think it's really important to call out that like we all are in this together. Like we all just want technology to be simpler and better for everybody. And I think one of the things that's really important about what you do specifically, I've mentioned a few things, the speaking in public, the open source community work, but you also like you might not realize it, but you do like you act kind of like as a pillar for folks that are trying to get into the space. Do you do any mentoring currently? Like to an extent, like do you work with sort of the next generation developers directly or come more indirectly?
Yeah, so directly I do both way. I also indirectly. So I I try to keep myself connected to the communities in Latam, Dominican Republic inclusive, and that's why I am like I participate in user groups over
Hmm.
there, remote, also conferences. There's one happening in the next month, and I'm trying to do this call, this talk, and but yeah, I from the community, there's I gotta say, there's a bunch of folks like me that we're trying to get the new generation to a good level not, as we know, not only technicals but only also teaching them the like all the things that they or most of the things that they need to learn, they need to know in order to be good developers. um so yeah, because we know that the main problem these days is the amount of information that exists is
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah.
And anyone coming into the career, or even somebody already in the career with very new in the career, can get overwhelmed
Hmm.
with the amount of information, and it happens a lot. People that jumps between things because of oh, there's this free tutorial for to do this X,
Yeah.
and then there's another free tutorial to do Y. Two completely different things. And then if you don't focus at the end, you will not learn X or Y. And having a mentor, uh, I know it's important to me. I have a mentor. So mentor are important regardless of
Yes.
the stage of your career. And but also being a mentor is, as we mentioned earlier, is the way to keep giving back. um so most of us, we left Dominican Republic, but what we want Dominican Republic and the community there in Dominican Republic to still keep growing. And the way for that to happen is that us, even though we are outside, to keep supporting those
Yeah.
folks that are inside and connecting with the new generation that is coming up.
I mean, that's great. Like, I think folks like you that are out there trying to make the next generation more successful is awesome. And I'm glad to hear that, you know, you're successful in that space. And for folks that might not be aware, and is the conference that you're going to, is it the Caribbean Developers Conference?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm going to two. There's a
Yeah.
TDC and there's another one. It's Death Fest, which is happen globally.
Okay.
Death Fest Santo Domingo. So I'm gonna be participating in two conferences.
Yeah, so if you're, the long story short is if you're in the Dominican Republic, or you can travel to the Dominican Republic, or you said it was in Santiago, the other one's in Santiago?
It's in Santo Domingo.
Oh, Santo Domingo. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're in Santo Domingo, please take a look at some of these conferences because I think that there's some great work going on there. And the only way that we're going to get back into like this this wave of in-person, really, really great technical conferences by folks attending and folks sponsoring. So I'll
Yeah.
put some more information to that in the show notes. So yeah, like that, we're at the top of the hour. So,
Wow.
exactly, right? That's what I
Wow.
was telling you, right? I want to thank you so much, Andres, for being on the show. This is a great conversation. I knew it was going to be. I told you it was going to be a good one before we started.
Yeah.
Um, do you have, before we sign off, do you have any parting words or things that you'd like to kind of add on to the end of our conversation?
Well, yes, I would say that we have been talking about the name of the show is Coffee and Open Source, two things that I love. I love coffee
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
And I would say, so anyone that it's Oktoberfest is coming there.
very
It's
good.
nice. It's coming like in the next 10 days in October. Use Oktoberfest to get into communities because many communities open up for that specific time, but do not don't only do it because of what you get through the
Yes,
Oktoberfest.
yes,
I mean, there's a we love swags. We love the things that companies send us when we participate in the hackathons that they do. But I mean, open source is bigger than Oktoberfest. That's what I really mean. That's what I
yeah,
want to say. Open source is there the whole year, and but using now, I mean, because now is companies are more open, projects are more open. There's more. Sometimes the first grab issues were more better documented. So use the opportunity, jump in a community that you feel that you're gonna have fun and have fun.
yeah,
Let's make let's keep supporting open source because of we know that open source is the way to go. We know for the fact that many of the fine new projects depend regardless of the application the framework and the technology they use will bring open source libraries as part of the fine new project. Fine new project means that hello world to print a hello world most there are gonna be some dependencies from open source. Even the same framework that you use is
yep,
gonna be open source. So let's keep it rolling
yeah.
because through open source you can connect the network, learn, and collaborate. And as I say, have fun. Have fun the way that you find funny. You feel like coding, have fun coding. There's a lot of places out there for you to collaborate doing code. If you want to talk, I enjoy talking. My wife says you talk too much.
Well, it is what
So
it is,
yeah,
right?
so having conversations, like having one-on-ones with people out of the community and listening their stories is huge. So, but use that channel that is free to keep growing because of the sky is the limit. That's how people say. So yeah, the
Yeah.
sky is the limit.
I could not have said that any better myself. I think you should take over and just run this show. Like no one can say that as good as me. Man, that was awesome. I really appreciate it. And if you've watched our show before, folks, you know what's coming. I'm going to ask my friend Andreas if they can think of, when they think of technology, open source, and the community around it. I want to hear from you, my friend. If you only had one word to describe what you feel from all of that, what word would that be for you?
So I would say the word teamwork.
Teamwork. That's good. That works fine for me. Do you have any reason why teamwork? Just because of the collaboration, or is something being
Yeah,
extra for you?
yeah, is the collaboration and
Yeah.
everything that I do. I can be either in my work, can be outside conference. It's mostly because of the collaborations and the people that are gonna be there with me doing that thing. So yeah, teamwork for me is important, and that's why um most of the time I finish my presentation saying that when I'm talking about communities, like the times where people used to work in the basement,
Yeah,
hidden like a dark, those times are over.
it's true.
That doesn't exist anymore. Not even in movies they use it anymore. So um, work computers these days is a collaboration we can see on Twitter about all the conversations that happened. And yeah, so teamwork is the word. Let's keep working together to make things better.
Oh man, that's awesome. That I I got nothing else to say. That was awesome. I mean, I want to thank you so much, Andres, for being on the show today. This was great. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And yeah, if you're liking the sort of conversation we have, be sure to like and subscribe and share them with your friends. And appreciate it, my friend Andres, and everybody tuning in. So that's for me, Isaac Levin. Thank you for tuning into Coffee and Open Source. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Bye.